So a few years ago, my dad and I were talking about if he ever died. And yeah, I told him, Dad, you don't want to die because if you die, we're just going to make fun of you at your funeral and we're going to buy you a very cheap casket and keep costs down. So we suggest that you stick around to have more control over how we enjoy you and remember you. But you know, he died anyway. And so this is my opportunity to keep my word to my father and have a little fun. As you know, education was very, very important to my dad. And he always encouraged us to not be lawyers, but teachers. And when my sister and I went to law school, he expressed to us how disappointed he was in us. And when I told him that I had decided to go to Harvard Law School, he told me that he was especially disappointed in me. So I eventually tried to make my dad proud by going from being a lawyer to a professor so that he could be proud of me again. And as a professor standing in the school where he sent us for 15 years, it wouldn't be a true memorial service to my dad's spirit and values if we didn't give you a quiz. So here is your quiz on John Binford. And the first question, the first part of this quiz is about grades. This is a multiple choice question, and I want you to answer after I provide you with your choices. Which of the following grades were acceptable to our dad? 1, A+, 2, an A, 3, an A-, 4, a B+, or 5, all of above? What do you think? An A. Who said A? Who said A? Do you not know John Binford? There was nothing acceptable about an A to my dad. If you came home and you got an A, my dad said, well, why didn't you get an A+? And if you said, well, because it's not on the grade scale, they don't offer A+ at LAB or Harvard or wherever you're going, he said, well, you should have done so well that they changed the grade scale for you. I can remember being in kindergarten here at Van Nuys First Baptist, and at the time my teacher, Mrs. Walton, would give out, actually all the kindergarten teachers, they'd give you a gold star every day that you did exceptionally well in school. And any day that we came home without a gold star, our dad would remind us every day should be a gold star day. Every day you should be recognized for being exceptional, for being your very best. So it's never acceptable to get an A, and I expect all of you to have an A+ today. So for your next question, which of the following stocks should you short this month? In other words, what should you be selling in light of my father's passing? 1, See's Candies. 2, In-N-Out Burger. 3, Baskin-Robbins. 4, Bob's Big Boy. 5, all of the above. Yes, yes, you know my dad. Wonderful. Well, let me see if you're able to do some fill in the blanks. I'm going to say a word or phrase, and I want you to tell me who comes to mind. 1, inspiring coach. Who comes to mind? Excellent. 2, fabulous father. Wonderful. 3, dependable. Crazy. Tequila. Don't, Ron Tudor, don't say a word, okay? I have never seen my dad drink tequila. I don't believe that my dad ever drank in his 20s and 30s, like Ron Tudor said. And that was just a trick question, and I'm sorry that Ron Tudor led you astray with that false recollection. So let's see if you can understand just how crazy my father was. Here are your true or false questions. True or false? My dad took most of his children on his honeymoon with Cindy. True! True! Not only did he call us on Christmas morning and say, hey, Cindy and I are getting married after, 12 years together? But where should we go on our honeymoon? So we said, well, we weren't planning to go on your honeymoon with you, Dad. We actually had a snowboarding trip planned that we're leaving on tomorrow, and he said, great, we'll go with you. So when my brother Matt was talking about what a close family we were so close that we went on each other's honeymoons, okay? Just a little bit scary close. And we had a lot of fun. So the next question, true or false? Binford Tools was named after my dad, John Binford. Oh, do you not know my dad? I mean, please. Okay, so my dad has told us our entire lives that Binford Tools was named after him because he went to high school with one of the creators, and that he had promised my dad in high school that I'm going to make you famous one day, John Binford. And so after that, anytime that we went anywhere in the family, we usually needed about somewhere between half a dozen or 10 hotel rooms, and he always got a corporate discount for Binford Tools, right? Okay, like, Dad, really? So my brother went on Wikipedia, and I didn't know that it was he who went on Wikipedia, and explained on Wikipedia that John Binford on Binford Tools was named after John Binford, who, knew one of the creators in high school, blah, blah, blah. You have no idea how many times that's been corrected by somebody else on Wikipedia. But I decided to do a little research to see whether or not this was one of my dad's true stories, which I'm now founding from some of the reflections sent to me by some of his hi-hat friends, that unfortunately some of the stories about what he did as a hi-hat actually appear to be true. And then some of the fun stories, like that John Binford, he was named after him on this television show, might not be true. And what I found out is that I can't find any of the creators in my dad's high school yearbook. So I really don't know. Except for that, I then found out that guess how John Binford dies on Binford Tools? He has an unexpected heart attack. So apparently they wrote this all into my dad's life. So it might not be that Binford Tools was named after my dad, but that my dad was named after John Binford on Binford Tools, and he's just following the script. So we won't really know, but I wonder. Here's another true or false. When my dad was 63 years old, he fulfilled his lifelong dream of becoming a coach. True. Who retires and then goes and works for free? I mean, think about it. Do you know how much my dad got paid for coaching? He made so little money that it cost him. Like, we're like, Dad, retire, go to Hawaii, go to Tahiti, come visit us. And he's like, no, I love these kids, I love my job. I'm happy to pay to work every day. So, literally, one of the smartest guys I know made no sense so much of the time, except for that he was one of the happiest, most joyful, most satisfied people that I know. And who wouldn't pay for that? I mean, if you could be surrounded by people you love and people who are motivated by you and derive satisfaction from each and every day, you too would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, make your wife coffee, which he always did, wake up your little girl, take care of her, get them ready for school, send them off, and then go to work yourself and pay for it at the end of the day. Because happiness is worth that to us, even if it means 6 days a week you're at work paying for it. So in any event, I love the fact that that dream came true, because when Matt told you that he was in college at the time, that he went to work on the railroad for the summer, he was actually preparing to become a PE teacher and a coach, and so it was full circle for him. Here's another true or false. When he was 70 years old, he became a father for the 7th time. Yes! Who has 7 children? Period. Who has 7 children at 35? Who has 7 children at 40? I mean, that's just crazy. That goes back to, the fill in the blank, John Binford is crazy. You don't have 7 children, and you don't have it at 70. And yet my dad did these things because he was so full of life and so full of love that he had so much to give. And I just love the fact that having another child and having this lifelong calling as a coach, which was finally fulfilled, and having such a wonderful wife and companion during the last third of his life, that it really made these last 10 years of his life the happiest that I've ever seen him, and the most fulfilling. So I love the fact that he married Cindy. I love the fact he became a coach, and I just love the fact that we have a little sister, because it's brought so much joy to our Father whom we love so much. Another true or false. Um, would my dad rather drive around for 20 minutes looking for the cheapest gas in town rather than spend 2 more cents per gallon? True! He would. So, like, my dad loved to go on these driving trips all summer, and he would say, he'd call us on the phone. We'd have multiple cars, caravanning up to, we loved to go to Yosemite. He loved to go to Yosemite, and we would go with him because we loved him. He'd love to go up to Tahoe, wherever it was. You know, he always had people who loved him and wanted to follow him. But there would be a series of cars, and there'd be a series of cell phones, and he would call each and every car, and he'd say, hey, get off at 42nd Street in Bakersfield because you'll find gas there for $1.48 a gallon. You get off, you make a right, then you make another left, and all of a sudden you'd see all these Binford cars pulling off of the 5, all going to the same gas station to save 2 cents a gallon. And if my dad found out that you paid more than the cheapest gas in town, he said, that's because you went to Harvard. I told you not to go to Harvard. So here's one. True or false? My dad held season tickets for 20 years and never told my husband. True! Ask my husband. We were down here in LA a few years ago, and there was a big game, and my dad and my husband were talking about it, and my dad said, oh, you want to go to that game? I can get you some tickets. So he gives us an address. We drive to that address here in the valley in Van Nuys, and the guy brings us in and explains that the tickets he's giving me are our dad's. And I said, you know, we had no idea that my dad has season tickets. And he said, oh yeah, he's had them for a while. So we're sitting in the USC stadium watching this great football game, and the person next to us said, oh, I'm surprised I haven't met you. Your dad's had these tickets for 20 years. And my husband was like, your father has had season tickets for 20 years and has never told us. So the next year we came back during football season, not coincidentally, and said, hey, you know, there's this really great USC football game this weekend. And my dad said, oh, I sold those tickets. So after 20 years, my husband got to see one USC football game with my dad's season tickets. So thanks, Dad. When my dad died, true or false, when my dad died, he was in the place he loved most, doing what he loved most, surrounded by some of the people who were most important to him. So true. And I have to tell you, you know, Heidi and I were with our families in Dublin when we received the call that my dad died. And Mike, my brother-in-law, came up to my hotel room very early in the morning and knocked on the door. And you know, if you know Mike, he doesn't mince words. You know, it went something like this. Your dad has died. He was in Mammoth and had a heart attack. It's like, oh my God, that's wonderful. That's just wonderful. And I went downstairs and I saw my sister, and she was just absolutely devastated. And my other sister, I talked to her on the phone, and she was wailing. And I'm like, but Dad, don't you see? He died as he lived. He did it his way. He had been going to Mammoth. He had been going to the Sierras ever since he was a little boy with his mother. He loved the Sierras. It was heaven to him. And being with Cindy and Haley, it was heaven to him. And he said this when he was alive. He said, I couldn't imagine a heaven that's any better than the heaven that I live every day with my family, with my loved ones. And then on top of that, he loved coaching so much. To be up there, that was the highlight of his coaching year, was that high altitude training. And so right then and there, sometimes I don't know if there's a God. And in moments like that, that's no coincidence. You don't live the type of life that John Binford lived and then die on your own terms. Die a healthy man who feels like he's 19 years old, who acts like he's 19 years old, and goes immediately without any pain, without any indignities, without any infirmities. That's God's hand. That is a reflection of the respect that my dad earned from God and the world. So let me give you a chance for some extra credit because, as I explained, there are no A's that are acceptable to my dad, so we need to make sure that all of you get an A+ so that he can be proud of you. For this, I want you to please raise your hand. Have you ever seen my dad work out? Run, hike, lift weights? Raise your hand if you've ever seen my dad do any of these things, and hold your hand up, please. Now I want anyone else in the audience, if you keep your hands up, anyone else in the audience, raise your hand if you've seen or know of my dad having someone you know run, lift weights, hike, etc. This is my dad's legacy. Thank you. You can put your hands down. My dad taught me to run, he taught me to hike, he taught me how to lift weights, and just like there were no A's, you never went halfway up the hill. I can remember climbing up Nevada Falls and leaning over the side and losing it down the side of the trail, and my dad says, "Come on, hon, wipe your mouth, we've still got a ways to go." Like, it was always to the top of the mountain. It was always jumping off bridges. It was always going to the tallest skyscraper and going to the very top. That was my dad. Everything was full tilt. And to the extent that it was built around physical exercise, that was important. My dad came to visit me when I was working with the president at Boston University. His name was John Silber, and he only had half an arm. And I don't know how you would feel if you were in your early 20s and working for a university president who's nationally, internationally known, and your dad comes and meets him and starts to show him how to do one-armed push-ups. But yeah, that was my dad. And 4 weeks ago, when my dad was, we were in Minnesota, my family and I had stopped in Minnesota to see my sister and her family and my grandmother. My grandmother had just had her 90th birthday. My dad said, "Well, maybe I'll meet you there." Because, you know, of course, LA is so close to Minneapolis, right? But sure enough, we landed at the airport, and my dad was there, 1 o'clock in the morning to pick us up. Had just driven in from LA, and we went up to see my grandmother and one of my nephews, or cousins. He was about 13, 14 years old, and what did my dad do? He spent a lot of his time that day teaching him how to do a series of different exercises to help him to build up going into his teenage years. And then my dad's dentist contacted me, our family dentist contacted me right after my dad died and said he was just in my office showing me how to do the push-ups correctly and other exercises. So it didn't matter if you were a university president, if you were a dentist, if you were a little scrawny kid trying to get ready for your teenage years, but my dad was always on the ground trying to teach you how to build yourself stronger. For this one, raise your hand if my father has ever prayed with or for you. My dad loved prayer. He just loved prayer. Like I said, the last time that I saw my dad, and we were with my grandmother, who was not actually his mother, it was his former mother-in-law, and being his only son, her only son-in-law, she always said that he was still her favorite son-in-law. But we formed a prayer circle, and we fully expected that we might not see my grandmother again. And he prayed for blessings on the family. And we didn't know at the time that actually he was the one that we wouldn't see again. But that was the type of person that my dad was, creating a prayer circle for his former mother-in-law and anticipating that he might not see her again. But, he certainly will in heaven. We've talked a little bit about my dad being a storyteller. And I'd like for you to raise your hand if my dad has ever told you a story. Okay, yeah, okay? So let me tell you my first story. Apparently, I'm told by my dad that my mother went into labor on the way to church, and that what he did was he turned around and took my mom home, and he greased up her thighs, and then he put her in a big tractor tire, and then he delivered me. And then he said he wrapped her waist, her midsection, in a real tight wrap to bring her girlish figure back. And that they couldn't afford a crib, apparently because he had given all of his money to Ron Tudor. And so he opened a drawer, and he put me in the drawer. But then he said I started to cry, and I was a little bit whiny, so he closed the drawer. And then he took me to church. And my mother did one of the cruelest things ever to me the other day. "Where are you, Mom?" She told me that's not true. I'm like, "What part of it's not true?" She's like, "We didn't really close the drawer." But one of the things that I loved most about my dad was his stories. And, I should say, is his storytelling, because those stories live on in us. My dad was a bit of a Forrest Gump. So it didn't matter whether he was checking into a hotel or whether he was getting cheap gas. He met the most amazing people. He had the most amazing coincidences. His rooms were always the cheapest, always the nicest, always the presidential suite that they comped him because he was John Binford from Binford Tools, whatever it was. He always scored incredible tickets. I can remember when he came back to Boston for my college graduation, we have pictures of our nephew, Austin, my nephew, Austin, on my dad's shoulders, holding up a sign, crossed out how many tickets we need. And with a big family, it started out as like 11, and then that was crossed out, and then it was 10, and then it was, 7, and then it was 1 ticket, And so my dad would walk around the Boston Red Sox stadium trying to get tickets 1 or 2 or 3 at a time, however many he got. But he always got the best tickets and always met the most incredible people. I mean, he told us about, how Natalie Wood was in love with him, and how, Annette Funicello had a crush on him, but he didn't feel the same way about her. And, it was always famous people falling in love with my dad, and lots of us non-famous people falling in love with him too. So the last assignment for you today is an essay. And I'm going to give you a sample answer. And then I'm going to ask that if anybody would like to share your reflections about my dad, we're creating a book, that I would love to receive them, and you can come up to me afterwards and I'll give you my email address, or you can get it from any of our family members. But basically, with this sample answer, I was working in Tokyo at one time, and I was feeling very overwhelmed. I was with an international firm, feeling very overwhelmed with the complexities of filing taxes in a foreign country, and I was talking to my dad about it, and he says, "Why don't I have my accountant call you?" It's like, "You have an accountant?" So he's like, "Yeah, I'll have them work with you." Or him work with you. So I get a call, not from regular accountant, but from like a big 8 accounting firm, back when there were big 8 accounting firms, and there were 3 accountants on the phone, and they wanted to talk for an hour about my dad. And what they said is, "What's it like growing up with John Binford?" It's like, "How do you know John Binford?" But they were really amazed by my dad, because I didn't know it at the time, but my dad touched a lot of people and impressed on them how unique he was. And this is my response. Imagine a dad who loved children so much that he had 7 of them. Imagine a dad who took you to church on Sunday and then out for a family dinner and to Baskin-Robbins afterwards every single week. Imagine a dad who sent you to great schools and any college you wanted to go, but with the caveat that you had to get good grades for him to pay for it. Imagine a dad who told you how disappointed he was when you told him you were going to Harvard because he wanted you to help farm workers and their families. Imagine a dad who taught you to fish, hike, run, and lift weights. Imagine a dad who would not give you a weekly allowance or money for good grades so that you would be motivated to get a job. Imagine a dad who would drive you and your siblings and a few friends all around the country for 1 month every summer and let your big sister listen to Fleetwood Mac's Rumors on 8-track tape again and again and again, Jerry. Imagine a dad who told you to get a job when you told him you'd really rather go to Europe. Imagine a dad who flew you home from your first weekend of college because you were so homesick because you flew straight to college from Rome after working all summer for that first trip to Europe, but not expecting to miss your dad so much afterwards. Imagine a dad who knocks on your law school dorm room the day before law school ends because he doesn't want you to have to pack and drive cross-country alone. Imagine a dad who asks you why you didn't get an A+ every time you got an A. Imagine a dad who would kick you out of the car next to Forest Lawn Cemetery, what a coincidence, late at night because you were being a sassy teenager, but eventually lets you back in after driving away for a little while. True story. Imagine a dad who would kick you out of, imagine a dad who always wants to drive 3 hours round trip to LAX in LA traffic just because you have a 1-hour layover and he wants to see you. Imagine a dad who is willing to fly over 70 hours round trip to see you for 4 days in Africa. Imagine a dad who stands by you as you are giving birth, and when your baby doesn't breathe, he starts praying, and then she breathes. Imagine a dad who delivered you when you were born and buried your brother, your brother-in-law, your niece, your nephew, and so many others with dignity and grace. Imagine a dad who sometimes talks to you daily, even though you live 1,000 miles away, just because he loves you. Imagine a dad who has the weather programmed for the location of each of his children so that he can know whether you are all warm that day. Imagine a dad who still sends you your favorite chocolates, perfume, gifts, and gifts well into your 40s. Imagine a dad who gave each child $500 towards their first car and then told them to get a job for the rest unless they wanted to drive an exploding Pinto. Which one of us did? But not for long. Imagine a dad who can talk just as easily to a Dairy Queen clerk as he can with a presidential candidate, both for hours, and I have seen it. Imagine a dad who can explain corn futures to you while driving across the plains of Kansas and tell you about talk to you about stock market manipulation from the observation deck of the World Trade Center. Imagine a dad whose own father died when he was young, and he always said that he didn't know how to be a dad because there was no one to teach him. If you can imagine a dad like this, then you can imagine our Father, and you will realize how very lucky we have been.